Hello, everyone. Good evening. Today, we are going to have a very important session on the very problematic rule, I would say, that is Rule 9610. And it's been quite a time that I've been associated with this rule, particularly. And, I can really imagine that how, or I would say, it's a very chaotic rule, and it has created a chaos like anything among the, exporter and importer community. Now, how this rule impacts and how this rule is problematic for your business, and how to kind of see that what could be the possible solutions for which we can see that this rule can be tackled. So today we're going to discuss about that how to handle the litigation and how to see that which way of refund should be opted for the future transactions, like how do you do the business. So for the future references, we'll see that how that refund procedure will be taken. I'll just share my screen. So we're going to discuss our today's session in four important parts. One is related to the brief history of the rule, related to, like, we'll just briefly discuss that what is this rule about, then how government have tried to regularize this, or like, should I rephrase myself, that whether they have even tried to regularize this or not yet. Then the third and important point is dilemma of interest, that whether the interest should be payable in regularizing 9610 matters, and how that levy of interest can be challenged, or what should be done in that case. And the fourth, I would say the most important thing that we are going to discuss is the handling litigation and way forward. That what should be our strategy when we kind of handle the litigation related to Rule 9610, and what should be the way forward, since we see that some new subsection has been enacted in main section 16, through which the refund in respect with export is there. So how to see that amendment and the spirit of amendment and the way forward, that how the refunds are going to be in future, that we're going to discuss briefly. Now, the thing is, just before discussing 9610, I would like to highlight a very important circular that was issued in 2018. And the circular was 45/19/2018, which kind of spoke about or stated the rationale behind the Rule 9610, that why Rule 9610 is there. So if we see the para 7.1 of that circular, which states that Sub-Rule 10 of Rule 96 of CGST rules seeks to prevent an exporter who is receiving goods from supplier availing the benefit of certain specified notifications under which they supply goods without payment of tax or at a reduced rate of tax from exporting goods under amount of IGST. This is to ensure that the exporter does not utilize the ITC availed on domestic supplies received to pay IGST on export of goods. So basically, they just want to say that if you procure your supplies duty-free or at a reduced rate, when we talk about reduced rate, that means you're procuring it by having the benefit of deemed export or the merchant export transaction on which the rate is reduced. So in that case, the government want that you should not utilize your domestic ITC to export with payment of IGST. Now, this is kind of absurd in our own nature, that there is no proper backing or any sort of reasoning is there, because Section 16 clearly provided two ways through which an exporter can claim the refund. One is that he can utilize, he can file a manual application or on the portal, and you calculate the refund as per Rule 89. So sub Rule 4 or 4A, that this much of unutilized credit is there, this much of zero-rated supplies is there. There is a formula given, and through which the proper ITC matched and everything is there. And then another simpler rule is Rule 96, in which you just make your exports with IGST. And when you file the shipping bill, you file the GSTR1, the refund gets automatically credited. Now, what government says that through this way, if you are procuring goods under advance authorization, that means in your credit ledger, the only credit pertains to the domestic supplies. So in that case, this is not tenable, or I would say this is not right for the government to provide you kind of an extra advantage to encash that ITC. That's what the government thinks. Now, there can be many reasons, because when you file the refund application as per Rule 89 of your unutilized ITC, in that the refund of capital goods is not given. And then there is a proper matching of ITC with your GSTR 2A is also there. But when you kind of claim the refund through Rule 96, it doesn't bar of capital goods refund also. At the same time, it does not bar of claiming that ITC which was even not reflected in your GSTR 2A. So that's what the government is kind of afraid of. But that rationale is in any transaction, not in respect with advance authorization per se, or in EOU case or in a merchant export transaction. That risk will be there in every transaction, even if any person is not availing the benefit of advance authorization or he is not a EOU unit. Even then also government will be under a threat of claiming I would say a fraudulent ITC can be there and a person is claiming refund. So how will you identify? Obviously, you will identify by having a proper scrutiny of ITC. So just putting 4 categories in a very problematic rule, it's not tenable, I would say, and it's not justified also. Now, if we see that what are those categories which are defined in Rule 96, let's divide the categories in 2 types. The first category is in respect with the supplies. Now, the both of the categories is applicable to the person who is claiming the refund. That we need to understand. We are speaking, or we are talking on the perspective of the person who is claiming the refund. Now, first person is if the exporter receives supplies on which following benefit are availed. Now, first category is in respect with the supplies. First supply is deemed exports. Second is merchant export scheme. If you received any supplies which is a deemed exports as per GST and which is a merchant export scheme, like you are having the benefit of reduced rate and you are procuring those supplies and then you are exporting with payment of IGST. In that case, the refund is restricted. It is in respect with the supplies, not with the supplier. It doesn't it has nothing to do with this. Which category is the supplier of? Second category is in respect with the exporter. That exporter himself is a EOU unit, or he has availed a advance authorization and he's procuring goods under advance authorization. So these categories are restricted in through Rule 9610, that these categories cannot claim refund by making payment of IGST on their exports if they have procured the goods by availing the benefit of these notifications. Now, can we say that ignorance is a bliss? Because if we see the past, can we say that we did not know that whether this rule is there, nobody stopped us? Or can we say that this information was not in the public domain, this was not publicized much, so many of the exporters couldn't follow the advanced rulings, or I would say the law of the land, so they couldn't just follow Rule 9610 violation. But can we say that? If we see the tendency that in 2019 also advanced ruling was filed in respect with seeking clarity in respect with Rule 9610, that whether this should be applicable or not. Then again, the advanced ruling was filed in 2021, and in 2022 also there was advanced ruling were filed, and these advanced rulings are very well in public domain and very detailed one also. So these speaks about I would say, a plain interpretation of rule, that whether this rule is really applicable or rule is giving really those restrictions in respect with these categories. So yes, if we read the rule in a plain language without interpreting it like its constitutional validity, whether this rule was introduced through a proper section or not, let's leave just that apart. Whether this restriction is very well there in the law at present, yes, this restriction is there. And we cannot say that it was not publicized much or like people did not know about it, because when you availed the advanced authorization or when you were having the status of EOU, so none of the authorities stopped you from claiming the refund. So when we say that no one stopped us from claiming the refund, can we say that we were right? Even if that decision has been taken by most of the industry players, even bigger players like MNCs, proper MNCs having a very well-equipped staff, very well-equipped GST consultants, even then also they failed to follow this Rule 9610 restriction. So that number of exporters are not very small, it is a very huge. And in respect with class of categories also, not only the SMEs, but MNCs also did not follow this rule correctly. But at that time also, this rule was properly, I would say, given in through notifications. The notifications can be absurd, the language can be absurd, but this rule was very much there. And as I mentioned, these 3 advanced rulings were filed to check the eligibility of those transactions with respect to this restriction are also available in public domain. But why this restriction is there? Why we are discussing about this kind of a brief background of Rule 9610 is to just give you an idea that will help you framing your mind that whether you should follow a certain litigation through filing a writ in High Court, or like it can be through any way. Even when you challenge your show cause notice, it's kind of a litigation that you have initiated. Now, when the GST law got introduced, so there was a committee of exports. There was basically a committee of officers were created, and specifically a committee for exports were created. At that time, Mr. 𝐼𝐸𝐺 used to be the finance minister. Mr. Rajiv, we just discussed a very brief outlay about the Rule 9610. That what is this rule about? What sort of categories are there, and what sort of issues that exporters these days facing. So I'll just give a link of today's kind of a very, I would say, a discussion video after completion of this session. So you'll just see that what we have discussed in initial 15 minutes. Now coming back to what we were discussing, that the committee of exports were made at that time, and the task was given to that committee to see that what sort of challenges are being faced on the export transactions. And one of the 2 highlighted point by the committee was that there is a delay in grant of refunds of IGST and input tax credit on goods and services used in exports. If you see that IGST exemption was not there from the day one when GST law got introduced. Even if you were having an advance authorization, still you did not have an IGST exemption upfront on your imports. Until when? Till the 13th of October 2017, when notification 79/2017 got introduced by giving the exemption benefit to the all people who were having advance authorization, and a separate notification 78 was issued for EOU category. Now, till then, a committee's observations were that there is a delay in grant of refunds of IGST and input tax credit. Second observation was working capital blockage for manufacturer exporters, including EOUs, because they were making upfront payment of GST. These were the observations. And after these observations came around, I would say in September only, September 17. And keeping these observations in mind, then in 22nd of council meeting, it was decided that there is a need of upfront exemption of IGST is needed for certain categories. And then the notification of 78 and 79 came into picture. Now that's another story, that 79 came with an additional condition of pre-import, but somehow that exemption came into picture. When the exemption came into picture on 13th of October, after just 10 days, Rule 9610 got introduced. That if you are claiming the exemption of IGST on your imports, on your procurements, then you cannot claim the refund with payment of IGST. As I mentioned, the rationale has been given by the government after 1 year that why we did this. At that time, though, no rationale was given. So that's how that was the perception of government at that time, that they addressed, yes, this is a problem, that yes, exporters are paying IGST upfront. Yes, they are having working capital issues. Still, they thought of categorizing 4 categories of supplies or suppliers through Rule 9610, barring them from claiming the refund through automatic route. Now, if we see the council's point of view, so on your screen, there is a para 8.2 of the minutes of meeting of 30th council meeting, in which what secretary of council, what he said that this is a double benefit which is being taken by exporters. That's why we had to introduce Rule 9610. This particular council meeting happened on 28th of September 2018. Just before this council's meeting, another notification of notification 39 2018 was issued. Now, just taking back you to the history of Rule 9610, that there were a lot of notifications were issued in respect with Rule 9610, but Rule 9610, I would say the language which was used in Rule 9610 was bit problematic, and it created kind of an anomaly among exporters that whether this is applicable to us or not, or whether this is applicable to supply or suppliers. So the multiplication of notifications were there. So that notification 39 was issued in a hurry. That Honorable Finance Minister of Punjab back then, Mr. Manpreet Badal, had to take the stand before council that why are you issuing these notifications in such a hurry? So this is the response by the secretary by mentioning that this is a double benefit that exporters are claiming. Now, what is this double benefit? Double benefit is that you're procuring goods duty-free and then the claiming refund of your ITC. Now, I don't know how this is double benefit, because this is what the section says. This is clearly not double benefit. What I'm trying to tell you is this is council's point of view to see the 9610 era. That how they were looking at the 9610. Immediately after this council's meeting, another notification 53 and 54 issued on 9th of October 2018 by correcting the language of Rule 9610 with a prospective effect. So that's the reason that we say that Rule 9610 is applicable from 9th of October 2018. Before that, rule doesn't exist because the language was not correct, that it should be applicable to all class of categories. So the language got corrected through notification 54. And that's how it is applicable only from 9th of October 2018. But what they say or what they mention through double benefit is very problematic. So they shouldn't have said that, because just a year back, they themselves addressed this issue through their committee only, that this is a real problem that exporter community is facing. So that's kind of a contradictory on its own. Now, how this issue became a bigger issue, and is this a overnight kind of a issue that got ignited just through judgment by Honorable Gujarat High Court in case of Cosmo Films? How it started? So as I mentioned that when IGST exemption was not there from the day one, and the IGST exemption came up with the condition of pre-import. That pre-import condition was that you need to import the duty-free goods first, then you will use that duty-free goods to manufacture your final product for the exports. Now, to check that whether people were having or following the pre-import violation or not, just a minute. So just to check that whether people were following the pre-import condition or not, DGFT recommended the matter to DRI to investigate that all these big players who are having a stake or who are having exports in crores and crores. So DRI investigated the matter. At the time of investigating the pre-import condition, they got to know they found out another gold mine of Rule 9610 violation. And initially, it got detected in many EOUs, basically, who gets a upfront exemption without having any sort of authorization, specifically unlike advanced authorization. So that led to multiple investigations led by DRI, which they continued till 2020, and even after that also. And in 2020, we got a very, I would say, publicized judgment, which kind of gave a publicity to Rule 9610 eventually, and it said that rule is very well constitutionally valid and it is applicable retrospectively from the day when the rule got introduced. That means 23rd of October 2017, the rule is applicable. That's what the Gujarat High Court judgment says. After that, many exporters filed a review petition that whether this judgment should be reviewed properly. Now, after that, when DRI was doing their investigations, we saw another landmark judgment of Canon India, which said that DRI is not a proper authority or proper officer as per the custom law. But by that time, that matter got very well publicized among GST audits, DGGI investigations, Anti Evasions, SIIB, post audit of customs. So all these authorities were like after the life of exporters by sending them numerous summons. Some of them have issued a show cause notice 2 years back, like even before the Cosmo films. I've seen the show cause notices even issued before the judgment. So there were many authorities. I'm not saying that the authorities got to know only after Cosmo films, but yes, many authorities, or I would say that fire in the jungle was only after this judgment. And as of now, like in present, if we see the observations by GST audit in the GST audit, what they conduct regularly as per Section 65 of GST Act, then the DGGI also have sent a lot of summons and show cause notices and asking for making payment of refunds that you have received through this violation. Then the Anti Evasion also must have sent a lot of show cause notices. SIIB have recently issuing a lot of summons in respect with these kind of refunds. And I've seen the notices, or I would say one-page letter from a post-audit customs also. And last but not the least, your GST jurisdiction, under the jurisdiction which you fall. So that jurisdiction is also must be after your life for making or regularizing this issue. Now, how the government came into picture, or how the government saw this whole matter, and what did they do? Because at the time when they were making promises to exporters and they were telling that yes, we are following a Make in India approach and we are focusing on in India making a manufacturing hub, making it as a exporters hub. So what did they really do? Because as I mentioned, that this matter is not for a bunch full of exporters, but this is like every second person who was having an advance authorization must have done one violation as per Rule 9610. Now, it is a question that whether he has identified himself yet or not, but if you'll see the books of any advance authorization holder, it will be very much rare that you will find this violation. You will always find this violation there. Either this or that pre-import. Because these are very much problematic when we see the practical reality who are having these authorizations. Everybody sees their working capital flow. But what did the government do to boost or to help the exporters? So they came up like after a lot of time have elapsed and matter has gone to high courts, numerous raids were there. DGGI is have come very harshly on the exporters. DRI have sent notices also. So after all this chaos, of 2 years. So government came up with 47th council meeting when they said or discussed, I would say the first time of this issue, when they said that if a person who has got the refund erroneously, so how to give him the credit? So even then also they did not talk about any sort of amnesty or giving them a relief sort of. They just said a very important aspect also, but in a very vague manner. I'll tell you why. So they said that how to give that credit of that amount that a particular person is regularizing his Rule 9610 issue and he is giving that refund back to us. If he is giving that refund back to us, so how should we give the credit to him? There is no law for that. There was no law till that date when they got this amendment into picture. So they said that we should give it through a order which will be passed by a proper officer after assessing that whether that amount of refund has been given along with interest or penalty, and he will issue a PMT 03A accordingly. So this whole procedure was introduced through Rule 86.4B. Now, when I read about these council meetings, so I thought that they must be introducing this rule under the refund provisions or under the demand or recovery provisions. Because there is only one section, or I would say only two sections, which speaks about erroneous refund, that is section 73 and 74. Then there is a separate section 54, which is specifically for the refund. But no, they did not issue these rule under those sections, but they introduced this rule under the category of electronic credit ledger. And they said that this rule 86.4B, which provides kind of a right, which says that this rule or this particular rule, which is introduced in the category of electronic credit ledger, it's a rule of electronic credit ledger. As per that rule, that amount will be given you as a credit after the officer will see, or after the taxpayer himself will see that he has deposited the tax or the refund along with applicable interest and penalty. That's what the language says of Rule 86.4B. Now, after this, another circular was also issued, which kind of took a step further, making it more problematic, said that the designated or the proper officer will analyze and will evaluate that whether tax, interest, and penalty has been paid or not. Then only he will issue the PMT 03A. So what they mentioned in council meetings is something else. So what law committee said or the recommended, that is something else. The law or the rule came into picture, that is something else. And the circular which they issued directing their officers to act upon is something else. Now, why this is happening? Because they also know that what is happening at the ground. Because before issuance of this particular notification, after Cosmo Films in 2020 till July last year, almost in 2 years, many people have paid the amount, either through recalling their bill of entries, or they have forgone their exemptions, or either through by making payment of the refund amount back. Now they must have done without interest also, and they have taken the suo motu credit also. Now, first question when this notification or this rule came into picture is, it was a position for those people who have already taken a stand that whether this notification is applicable to us or not. So technically, if we read the notification, the language is prospective only. Now, this notification doesn't applicable to the situation or the action which you have already taken before issuance of this notification or the circular, which kind of gives a advantageous position to those people who have already taken the stand before issuance of this notification. But what changed after this notification was that officer had a right to stop me from taking credit. Now, by now, you must be understood that there is a no provision for taking provisional credit in GST law now. That section 69 has been repealed. that section has been repealed. Now that we cannot take provisional credit in the GST law. So how to take credit and what to do? So how this particular notification speaks. Now, if we see the rule 86(4)(b), as I mentioned, that it has no connection whatsoever with section 54, 73, 74. This rule doesn't specify any section of interest, any section of penalty, that how we should be doing the analysis or how we should analyze that whether proper interest or penalty has been paid. Also, this rule does not categorize a refund as erroneous. Now, what do we mean by erroneous refund? When it is granted, when a refund is granted to any person on the basis of false facts, so that is erroneous on the part of taxpayer, that he has given the wrong facts and we have given him the refund erroneously. Now, what if that person has given the all facts right and he have not given any information wrongly? In rule 96(10), when you got the refund, did you give any information wrongly? You had a valid advance authorization. When you filed shipping bill, you very well specifically mentioned that this export is for advance authorization. And you select that category of with payment of IGST. So on whose part this is erroneous? So this rule doesn't bifurcate that category, that this should be erroneous on the part of taxpayer or on the part of tax, on the part of revenue. Then penalty or interest, when we talk about, these are penal in nature. This is the penalty is casted upon you when you perform some sort of wrong action. Now you must have chosen the wrong procedure to claim the refund, but you have not got the extra refund. And if you have got the extra refund, take that extra refund amount back, not the whole refund you need to get back and get deposit. This is a very time taking, and this is a very nonsense task to perform, that when we should give our money, we should, first of all, we should arrange that money, then we should give it back to the government with interest, then we should take that amount back as a credit, then again we should claim that amount as a refund, and we should challenge the interest separately. That's what's happening. So this is a very nonsense and time-consuming task which the government have given to the exporters after this particular notification. Now, what they have said in rule, that the levy of interest and penalty rests with the taxpayer, that he will analyze himself that whether it is applicable to him or not. Now, the language of rule 86(4)(b) is in a nature that officer will have to issue an order of PMT 03A. The rules language does not state that he will analyze whether interest or penalty have been paid fully or not. Rule doesn't say that. Rule is very clear. He says that you will pay the tax with interest and penalty after your own assessment. It doesn't give power to officer to analyze. That power is given through circular. It is not in the rule. Now, in a situation, if my request is declined, whether officer will be issuing PMT 03A? Technically, there is no answer to this. So even after making a payment of tax, if you think that interest and penalty should not be payable, officer is just waiting. They're not doing anything, because there is no provision in the law to decline my request through PMT 03A. That means PMT 03A can be only a positive order. Apart from that, there will be no letter or no performa has been prescribed. Now, practically, they are issuing a one-page letter that you have not paid the interest, so we will not give you the order of PMT 03A. Now, that is another question of law, that whether that letter in itself challengeable before appellate authority or not. Now, whether this is an order or not. So by making it, they should have made it easier for exporter community, but they have made it very much cumbersome. They have made the process very cumbersome for exporters, that they are not able to analyze that that even if I don't want to pay the interest, I want to challenge it. You issue me a separate show cause notice. I'm giving you the tax amount back. Give me the credit back. That's a very basic thing which we are asking, because when we claimed the refund at the time of making exports with payment of IGST, at that time your credit ledger got debited with a certain amount, and you got that amount in a cash form. Now today you're giving that cash amount back to the government, and government is putting some condition on it. So that is somehow unjustifiable. Now, what are the options with the SSC at present? Even after introduction of this rule, what are these two options that SSC can take to regularize this Rule 9610 problem? So one way is very clear that we have discussed, just that we make the payment through DRC03 along with the interest of 18% from the day on which you got the refund till the day you pay that amount back. All the guidelines have been given in Circular 174 that request for making payment will be in a manual form. But now the officer is having the issue of PMT3A on their portal also. So the request from assessee side is manual, but the issuance from the officer side has become online now. And you can view this PMT03A on your portal also when the officer issue it. Second way to do is that you pay your exemption back. You tell the government that, yes, I made a mistake and I just want to give the exemption back to you. I don't want to take the exemption. Now, why do we say it? Now, for the advance authorization holders specifically, it might not be the case that the whole of the raw material is coming from outside India. It might be possible that out of 10 raw material, only one is coming from out of India. But when you claim the refund amount, so that FOB value is the final product's value. So certainly, if we evaluate both the cases, so that violation of exemption will be very lesser than the refund amount you received on the whole product's value. So in that case, you can evaluate that you can give that exemption back. Now, when we say that we wish to give that exemption back, then also there is a problem that practically port authorities or custom authorities are declining, or I would say not doing anything on these kind of files. Now, under which section we are saying that we are giving this exemption back? Now, this is kind of a reassessment and request of amendment as per section 149. Because apart from this, custom has no provision. Now, how can you make the payment? When we talk about giving away our exemptions back, we have two options to pay the custom duty. I will not call it basic custom duty. This is not a custom duty. This is a levy as per custom law. But this is not a custom duty. So there are two ways just to pay these kind of duties back. Either through TR6 challan, you make the payment through manual challan. Second way to do is through recalling of bill of entry, in which the online procedure is there. Out of charge is being cancelled and the bill of entry is recalled, and then you make the payment. Now, when you make the payment through TRC06, you have an option not to pay the interest. But the only problem is TR6 is not a valid document as per, or I would say it's a valid document for making the payment of tax, but it is not a document which is stated as a valid document for claiming the input tax credit of the amount which you have paid. Even if you have paid the IGST amount today, but this is not very specifically written in Rule 36 of CGST law, which speaks about certain documents for claiming the ITC. Now, we may differ with whatever is written, but I'm just telling you what is there already. Second option, in which when we talk about recalling of bill of entry, if it is possible, and if many people have done it, so that amount is automatically getting reflected in the subsequent month in which you have paid in your 2A, in GST 2A. So the most viable option The most economical option for those people who have just imported one article of out of like 10 or 20 articles, and they have only procured one article from outside India. The most viable option is to go through recalling of bill of entry approach, in which they are getting the legitimate credit and everything is there. That is giving the peace to the exporter. Now to say that whether all the options are right, to my opinion, yes. If you have made up your mind to make the payment, so first of all, we are discussing about the approach in which exporter is having mindset to make the payment. So for making payment, we have two options. One is through DRC03, that is in your control, that you are making, you can do it in your office, like through DRC03, you don't need to communicate the same to any GST officer. But when we talk about making payment of custom duty back or the IGST amount back, in that case, you need to interact with the GST with the custom officer. You need to take that permission to recall bill of entries and submit that TR6 request with the government. Now, second question comes when we talk about all these things is, that is erroneous refund. What is erroneous refund? Now, this particular law doesn't define the meaning of erroneous refund. Now, if we see that what is erroneous refund means, so there is a judgment of Supreme Court which says that incorrect assumption of facts or incorrect assumption of law will satisfy the requirement of the order being erroneous. That is very clear, that it can be an assumption mistake from either of the side, but that order is called erroneous. Now that order is called erroneous, and that erroneous order is coming up with a replication of interest and penalty. So who shall be compensated? That whether the revenue shall be compensated with interest or penalty, or whether the taxpayer will be compensated with interest or penalty. So that's a question which law doesn't very clearly specify. So that opens another door of litigation wherein you will be challenging the levy of interest and penalty in case the government is or the revenue of the particular jurisdiction is asking for. Now, the dilemma from a litigation perspective. So the first category, who is making payment, they have two options. That is very clear. We'll have to go by that option only. Now, before going to that recalling of bill of entry, if some authority is declining a request of section 149, so there is a recent judgment in the case of Sony India, when the Supreme Court said that, Supreme Court basically declined the SLP filed by the revenue in one of the judgment issued by the High Court, that whether there is a time limit for section 149 or not. So if we read the section plainly, it doesn't specify any sort of timeline. The section 149 of customs doesn't specify any timeline for any sort of amendment. But if my request today, when I forgo my exemption back, if nobody is listening, so what is the legal remedy available to me is, you have no legal remedy in the custom per se, but you will have to go to the High Court for seeking directions. That's the only option. Even if you wish to make the payment. Now, that's another sad story, that a person who is ready to make the payment and the officer is not accepting the way through which he wished to make the payment, then also you'll have to you have to bang the door of High Court for seeking the direction. So now all this leading us to a dilemma of what? Now there are two key notification 78 and 79, which pertains to advance authorization or EOU, exemption related to IGST. These are not subject to any condition which is directly connected with Rule 9610. That the person who is claiming the benefit of 78 and 79 will not be given the refund with payment of IGST. That is not written in the 78 or 79. Even in the mother notification through which these notifications come, notification 18/2015 of customs also does not specify these kind of conditions. Why that condition is necessary? Because that pre-import condition was very well embedded in the notification itself. That notification or that restriction is in the foreign trade policy also. That's a separate thing. But they gave that notification also very conditional, that this notification is conditional in itself. But this condition is not written in specifically in the 78 or 79. Second is section 17 also does not bifurcate between the class of categories. That this section benefit will be given to this class of categories specified by the central government through this right. This is not there. We'll discuss at very last that this amendment is not there. Now they have amended the section. But as of today, this particular restriction is not there. Now Rule 9610 got introduced through section 164, which is the omnibus section to introduce certain rules in respect with clarity for the general public. So that rule got introduced through section 164, not from section 16 of IGST or section 54 of CGST Act. So this is not this is a rule related to refund, but this did not got enacted through that particular section. It's got enacted through separate section 164. I don't know the reason for that. Now that rule 86(4)(b), as I mentioned, has no connection whatsoever with 54, 73, 74. So that is not having any direct connection. Now the section 50, which speaks specifically, the only section in GST, you don't need to find a section for interest levy in GST law. The only section 50, does not stipulate any condition for the imposition of interest in these kind of transactions. That is also a point. So that dilemma of making the payment, that you wish to make the payment, yes, this is the procedure. If this procedure is not working, yes, I can approach the High Court. Yes, you can approach the High Court, but I just wish to make the payment of tax, not the interest. So whether that dilemma of interest is there or not, yes, certainly it is there. Because if you see the language of 86(4)(b), they have very conveniently said that interest or penalty applicable, with applicable as per which section of interest or which rule of interest or penalty, they have not written it. Now, as I mentioned, that finding a provision in respect with interest levy in GST law is not that difficult. There is only one section, section 50. Section 50 speaks about two situations. First situation is fails to pay the tax. When you fails to pay the tax, when you short pay the tax, only then the section levy the interest levy on you. Second levy is there when you make the undue or excess claim of input tax credit and utilize the same. So under these two categories, only the interest levy can be there. Now, one may argue that section 73 speaks about the interest on erroneous refund as per section 50. Agreed. But whether that section is connected with rule 86(4)(b), no, it is not. So to call a refund erroneous, they should have connected these dots together. Now it is very scattered. Every provision having its value on its own. But when we read that collectively, so there is no clear section which is providing a direct levy of interest or penalty on regularizing these kind of refunds. So yes, the dilemma of interest is very big because we are talking about a matters belonging to 2018 or 19. And the interest, if we talk about, when we talk about the calculate the violation, so it is almost half of the amount, even more than the half of the amount, the interest is there. So yes, this is a substantial amount which one should think before making a payment. If your pocket allow and you make the payment, then also you are challenging. If your pocket doesn't allow, then also you are challenging. So this aspect is still open to litigation. Not two important judgments. However, there are a lot of judgments, but I just kept only two judgments, which will give you an insight that what court think of levy of interest and penalty. See, interest and penalty is in kind of a additional tax in nature. This is the tax in nature. If tax is there, then only interest and penalty there. If there is no tax, then this interest and penalty doesn't substantiate. Like on exempt supplies, if there is no tax, so there cannot be an interest. Obviously, if not making any payment. So what Supreme Court said in Bidla Cement Works, that any provision made in statute for charging of or levying the interest on delayed payment of tax must be construed as substantive law and not an adjectival law. There should be a very much subjective section for levy of interest and penalty. It cannot arise mere due to interpretation of a section that yes, interest should be applicable. That assumption that revenue officers trying to create from regularizing 9610, that should not be there. That interpretation should be very much clear. If you read the language of section 50, if it would have mentioned the regularization or these kind of matters also in that section, so then we are clear that yes, interest will be payable. Then you will have to challenge the interest on a separate ground, on interest on the revenue neutrality, and the whole transaction is like that. You will have to challenge it in a very separate era. Same thing, Gujarat High Court have mentioned that interest can be levied or charged on the delayed payment of tax only if statute that levy and charges the tax makes a substantive provision in this behalf. So that particular provision should be there clearly. Now, how these two particular rules, I would say pre-import and 9610 are related, because they got introduced at almost the same time. And why we are discussing a pre-import issue while discussing 9610 is because there is a time at when both the violation can be there, and these both violation are regularized if you regularize one issue. As you know that pre-import condition issue is in respect with the imports. So there is one time when the timing of both the provisions coincide, is that from 9th of October 2018 till 10th of January 2019, when pre-import was also there and Rule 9610 was also there. Since they have come up with a separate circular stating that how pre-import should be regularized, and they have mentioned very cleverly, I would say, because these bureaucrats knew that yes, people are dealing with Rule 9610 also, and they have made the payment through TR6, and they have taken the credit also. Now they are not showing or issuing any circular in respect with Rule 9610. But what they have embedded, or what they have tried to create a more chaotic situation is in which a circular in which they have mentioned that TR6 cannot be a valid document for claiming the credit. And they have given a very detailed lecture on the eligibility of ITC in that particular circular, that is in respect with pre-import, that after Supreme Court judgment, how to regularize the pre-import issue. So if you regularize your pre-import issue at the same time, if you have violated the Rule 9610, so that if you regularize the pre-import issue, your 9610 issue get automatically regularized, at least for that period, from 9th of October 2018 till 31st Jan 2019. But at the same time, if you have paid the refund amount back to the government, so on that very particular transaction, you'll have to give away your IGST exemption also. That is another case. So that means for that period, if you regularize pre-import issue by making payment of IGST exemption back, your 9610 issue also get regularized. But it's not a vice versa situation that you regularize your 9610 issue through making payment of IGST refund amount back. Still, you'll have to make the payment of your IGST exemption back. So this is not a mutually exclusive, but giving a one-way solution through regularizing the IGST exemption for pre-import. Why we are discussing this is because circular states a way through which bill of entry can be recalled and we can make the payment of IGST. That's the way basically. That should be ideally applicable to Rule 9610 also. Because moreover less, the situation remains the same that in Rule 9610 also you are giving away your exemption back. In pre-import condition also, when you regularize pre-import issue, in that issue also you regularize your IGST exemption back only. So the language should squarely applicable to Rule 9610. In most of the cases, they have accepted the fact and they have recalled the bill of entry. But still the situation doesn't remain same among all the ports or port authorities, especially the major ones like Nhava Sheva and Delhi Customs is not accepting the plea that yes, this circular's benefit should be extended to Rule 9610 also. Though they have not declined very clearly as of now, but yes, they're not have accepted the files also related to it. So all of this is leading us to conclude our session with handling litigation, that how you should handle it now, what you should do. So there are four possible scenarios. There can be many scenarios, but like mostly these four scenarios will be there. First one is payment of refund. So that you can, as I mentioned, that you can initiate through DRC 03 along with interest if your pocket allows. And at the same time, you file a writ petition before High Court challenging the levy of interest. Now, simultaneously, as I mentioned, that you can take the credit, and of that amount you has taken as a credit, that will be a very valid credit when you claim the refund through LUT mode of that particular month. So you can ultimately you can realize that. So it's a time of it's basically a cycle that you'll have to see that how are you making that payment and how that payment is getting realized also. That can be analyzed. First, when we take up that case, we analyze that only, that how this whole transaction and how the strategy will be there. Second is payment of exemption. That can be done only through TRC 06 or that bill of entry recalling method. You will have to submit a manual request stating all the facts before custom authority. Now you can take the benefit or take the language benefit of that circular also, which I mentioned issued specifically for pre-import issue. If the High Court, if that particular custom authority doesn't listen to you, so you can file a writ in High Court for seeking the directions. That is also there. That has happened. In many cases, we have done that. Now, if we make no payment, if we do not wish to make any payment and we just wish to challenge the ultra virus rule 9610, or ideally I would say contesting the validity of Rule 9610, then that is also possible. You can file a writ. Since the stake involved in most of the cases is very huge, certainly it's more than the working capital flow of 1 month. So you can make a very well writ petition. Then the last but not the least is that you wish to make the payment, but you don't wish to make the payment of interest. Now that situation is a bit problematic because when you make the payment of tax portion, there is no provision in GST law per se to take the credit of the same. Now it leads to a situation wherein that amount gets stuck if you do not make the payment of interest. After making the payment of tax, you can file a writ before High Court challenging the levy of interest, but it will take some time. Until that time, whether that court will be giving the interim relief through directing the authorities to give you the credit is very remote. But certainly it can give you a blanket, or it stops the clock of interest that is going on a day-to-day basis. This is the most adopted way which people have adopted, in which they have made the payment of principal. They have not made the payment of interest and they have filed a writ before High Court. So this is the best they can do. Or if your pocket certainly allows for the more, so along with that refund amount, you should ideally pay the interest and then approach the High Court. So at least that interest is also stopped. You got the credit also, and the litigation also substantiated. Litigation also continues. Now, at what stage you can take these kind of a possible action is, if your case is at summon stage, you should see that what sort of amount is involved, how that officer is, handling your case. So according to the situation, the decision can be taken whether we should approach to High Court or whether at that time we should cooperate with authorities also. Many people have filed it even after issuance of summon because the stake involved was too high. And High Court have given a stay also in those matters. If you are at a show cause notice stage where when the show cause notice have been issued, so ideally you should make a reply to that show cause notice, either through, obviously you will be challenging to that, and then you can move to the High Court. Then order passed by authority, whether order after challenging the or contesting the show cause notice, authority have passed the order, then there is an option, either you go to the first appeal, file the first appeal, go to the appellate authority, or go to the High Court. Now, I'm not discussing that why you should approach High Court, why High Court should accept your writ petition at these stages, that these, you can say that this case is very premature or something like that, because we're not discussing that. I'm just giving a possible solution. Then order passed by appellate authority. After passing of appellate authority, we don't have option to go to tribunal as of now. So either then also I would say there are two options legally. One is to approach High Court, certainly, if there is no tribunal. Then if a person do not wish to have a High Court at that stage also, so to grant a stay on that matter, there is a particular circular 132, which says that till the time tribunal is not there, you should file a declaration before GST authorities and there will be automatic stay on the particular matter. So these can be the possible solutions through which the litigation can be handled at this stage. Now, last but not the least, if we see that through Finance Act 2021, a certain amendments were proposed in Section 16, that it was said that Section 16, which gives exporter two options, either through export with LUT or export with payment. So that export with payment model will be subject to few conditions, few safeguards, few class of categories, or it will be applicable or given to only class of categories. So that is basically, the category is not defined yet, but yes, this section is enacted and this section is very well applicable from 1st of October 2023. And a new subsection 4 is given in Section 16, the main, or I would say mother section of claiming refund. And it says that government, on recommendation of council and subject to such condition or safeguard, may specify a class of person or a class of goods or services. That means government can notify a certain class of category or a certain class of category of goods or services to whom this option of making exports with payment of IBST will be available. So this is also something which everyone should take interest in, because they should analyze their, I would say, supply chain, and they should ideally route their refund mechanism to the LUT mode, because that is something which will be there always. Because certainly it is expected that they will be categorizing those certain supplies under through these separate notifications to give it as a proper or a foolproof legal backing, that yes, now these categories are defined through a proper section, and yes, this restriction is very well there. So it gives kind of a more relief, or I would say more sense of more foolproof option to the revenue. So ideally, you should see your supply chain and take a firm decision before 1st of October 2023. Now, if anybody is having any questions, so they can ask, or you can note down my number or email ID. You can send it to me after the session also. There is one query which says that in case no payment, if we have challenged the rule 9610, but still adjudication authority continued their adjudication process, where court itself said that to continue adjudication but without coercive recovery. What can we do in a scenario they have continued their adjudication and issued SCN under section 74? See, if court have not given the interim relief, they have not given any stay at the time of filing the writ, stay in respect with the adjudication. So as you mentioned that the adjudication in itself did not get the stay. So ideally you should follow the procedure, then you'll have to respond back to the authority that why section 74 should not be invoked. And first of all, the main plea would be to kind of evade yourself from the levy of section 74. And then the ideally challenge can be made to rule 9610. Now that depends on the writ also that you have filed, that writ was filed in respect with what sort of challenge. So your reply should align, ideally it should align to the writ that you have filed, unless there is no extra fact that department has come across. So ideally that procedure is being followed or should be followed, I would say. So till now, the government have not introduced any list of exporters for Rule 9610 or Section 1641. Till now, they have not. But certainly, after introduction of these particular section, they will come up. They will come across that sort of class of category. That's it. That's all. So for all other queries, as you have noted down my number or email ID, so you can contact me anytime. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining.